Welcome to the Green Business Canvas Overview. My name is Chris Kauzmann. I work for the Baker Institute for Creativity, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I'm excited today to share with you this canvas. It's a one-page version of a business model. What I love about this is it allows people who might not be super comfortable in the business field, even those who are comfortable in the business field, to map out the overall concepts of what a business model is, understand who gives and who gets in each situation from all the customers and users and stakeholders involved, and how those people interact throughout the business model to ultimately drive a profitable business that can go do good for the world. So to get started, the first thing we need to do is start understanding who's involved in the system. And that really gets started with the stakeholders. So I'm going to be referring to this scribbled drawing over here. You don't have to read all the context on here. It's mostly just to understand where the blocks are in this canvas and how they relate to each other. So the stakeholders are all the way on the left here. The stakeholders are anyone that's involved in the business. So as you've been learning in lesson 3 so far, you'll see that there are people that might be community leaders in that list. There might be local government in that list, potential suppliers for your business in that list. It's everyone involved that has to make something and be involved in an organization to allow the business to exist. So as an example, this coffee cup, reusable coffee cup, I'm both the customer and the end user of this product. So what that means is I paid for the product, and that's how we typically define a customer, who is paying for the product or service that's being provided. But I'm also the end user. I happen to also be the one that uses this cup on a daily basis. When we're talking about those customers versus the stakeholders and the end users, it's really important to understand those differences. There are many businesses, and especially businesses that relate to green entrepreneurship, that the customer may be different than the end user. A classic example of that would be a child's diaper, a baby's diaper. The parent is typically the customer, the one purchasing the diaper, but the baby is the one that's using it. The baby is actually the one that wears that diaper. Both groups has to be satisfied when you're creating a product or service like that. If either the customer, end user, or a stakeholder is dissatisfied, then the whole system can come down. And it doesn't matter if your product at the end of the day works perfectly, if the customer isn't willing to buy it in the first place, if it's not in the right stores, if it's not sold through the right channels. So you have to make sure that the stakeholders, you understand who they are and what their needs are, as well as your customers and end users. So once you list your stakeholders in this far left bucket here, you want to pull out the really important stakeholder, which is known as your customer. Right? Your customer is going to go over here. Your customer is the one that defines how this business makes its money. The customer is the one that pays for the services or the product. Once you identify who that customer is, and we're starting with that user, many times you'll hear this as user-centered design, you want to go to the value proposition. What value are you offering that customer? It has to be great enough that they're willing to pay for that service, that it can be a business model as opposed to just something that you're giving someone, right? So the value has to be truly, truly valuable to that person. You have to understand to that customer, what value are you offering? Once you understand the value that you're offering your customer, you want to connect this dot here and start this loop over to your customers. This box in the middle here is your channels. The channels is how the value is delivered to your customers. That's really important because sometimes your value might be delivered to your customers through a product or service. Sometimes it might be through technology. Sometimes it might be through some kind of innovative way of changing a supply chain, right? So the channel is how the customer receives that value. In addition to that, sometimes you can put in how your marketing channels work. So how does your customer know about the value that they have the opportunity of purchasing and buying and being involved with? Once this loop has been made, the customer goes back to the value proposition here through the relationships box. Now that relationships box here is the way in which the customer has a relationship to the company itself. So many business models, you might have a model where you sell a product and you never interact with that customer again. My coffee cup, I bought this coffee cup, I've never interacted with the company that I bought the coffee cup from again. So that customer relationship is a fairly weak relationship. It's called a transactional relationship. I purchased it and then I leave. There are other businesses that you have active involvement with the company on an ongoing basis. So think about something like a local grocery store. I regularly go there. I recognize the cashiers that are there. I can interact with people there. I go back once a week and I'm recurring there. So their business, they have to have a relationship that inspires me to want to come back and continue to engage with them over time. So that customer relationship is something you want to design for in your business model to understand, do I need something that's deep and long-term, or do I need something that's more transactional and a one-off type arrangement, or some combination of something? This side of the business model drives your revenue. So these interactions, the customer is buying the value in some way, and that's what creates your revenue down here. The scary thing is typically there's only one or two boxes down here of the types of revenue you're having come in an early stage venture. So down in this box, you'll want to really make sure that you're capturing how are we making the money? What is the customer actually paying for in this exchange of value through these channels and through this relationship? Once you've completed this side and you have a rough understanding of where you might be making your revenue, you want to be flipping over to the left-hand side and completing the rest of the items here. So we've already talked about the stakeholders, that you'll list out all of these people that might be involved on this side. Once you've done that, you want to start up top here with key activities. The key activities are all of the things you need to do, the critical components you need to do as an organization to be able to deliver that value to your customers. So in this coffee cup example, if I was running the coffee cup company, I would have some key activities of things like manufacturing, right? I would have to actually build this product. I would have a key activity of marketing, right? I'd have to put this product out there in the world somewhere so that somebody would be able to know about that product and be able to purchase that product, right? I might have a key activity of new product development. I might have made one coffee cup to start, but I might be innovating on that coffee cup. And so that might be critical to my business model to continue to innovate and create new versions of that, new designs and better functions and features for my customers. The activities are all of the critical things you need to be doing as an organization. When you have these activities here, the activities then populate down to key resources and a confirmation of your stakeholders. So what I mean by that is for every item that you have in your key activities list, you have to be able to execute on that activity by either having a resource that allows you to do that or a stakeholder that allows you to be partnered with and allows you to do that. So if you have a key activity of manufacturing, you have a business model decision and strategic decision to either say, I need to have the key resources in my organization that allow me to do the manufacturing. Right? So that might be, I need a facility, I need equipment, I need tools, I need people that will run those tools and operate that machinery, right? Or you might say, we don't want to have that as a key resource to us. We want to partner with a stakeholder that's a manufacturer. So you need to have every activity here either captured by a partner that's able and allows you to create that opportunity, or a resource that allows you yourself as the organization to execute on that. So these resources will pile up, and you can go item by item through your activities and decide, is this activity something we want to have as a resource, or is this activity something we need to find a partner and a stakeholder for? Once you've done that, the last box that's left on this diagram here is our cost structures at the bottom. So when I said before over here in revenue streams that it's a little scary because there's only maybe one or two or three boxes for a multi-revenue stream business, on the cost structure side, it's really scary because this is going to be overflowing with information over here. You're going to have this box bleeding out of the edges of the business model canvas because there's so many costs you have to be considering. That shouldn't scare you. You should be mapping those things so that you can design your business model in a way that allows your revenues, even though there are fewer of them, typically, to overcome the costs that are on this side of the business model canvas. Now, the easiest way to understand what are all these things I should be putting in this bucket down here is to go directly to your key resources. Now, your key resources, like I said before, allow you to do these key activities. So your resources, you can now go item by item through your key resources and say, well, what costs are associated with these resources? So along that example of a manufacturing facility that you may have decided you want to have as part of your resources, you might say, okay, well, there's a piece of equipment we need to buy. Well, then down here in your cost structure, you have to include that item of purchasing equipment. That's a cost to your business. If you have something up here that is, to have an employee that's going to run that piece of equipment and do design and manufacturing work for you, well, that employee now has a cost associated with that. You have to pay them a salary, you have to pay them, benefits or however you're going through that process, but that employee has a cost to you. So all of your resources here drive directly down into costs. Typically then, many of your stakeholders also will have costs associated with them. So you may need to think through, well, if we solve one of these activities with getting a partner, a manufacturing partner isn't going to come for free, right? So you may need to capture the costs that it would take for that manufacturing partner to be involved with you. So once you've done that, typically down here, your cost structures, you're going to have two costs that are fairly regularly the most expensive costs in most businesses. And those are typically your physical infrastructure and, more importantly, the people that are involved. So paying for people's time and paying for the physical infrastructure that your company needs to exist in are typically the two most expensive things. So make sure those are at least captured in here and you have a really deep understanding of those before you get into some of the smaller costs and expenses of doing business that might exist for your particular situation. Once you've done that, you've gone through your first round of the business model canvas. So one page, you've captured all of the key elements to a business model, understanding how it works, understanding how the customers relate to the value, and how the system works together. This is something that can be used as essentially a prototype for how your business works. You should be able to make one of these in 5 or 10 minutes for your business and be comfortable scratching something out, changing it, throwing it away, and creating a new one. It's the way for you to experiment how this business model might work, how each element relates to the other elements on the canvas, and how you might be able to determine what's going to work or not at an early stage while you're thinking through and designing that business model. The last thing that's important to think about is the time frame in which you're modeling your business. So it's very important to understand, are you modeling your business for what you think your business is going to look like during the first 6 months of operation, or are you modeling your business for what it's going to look like at 3 years? So very often up at the top, I'll put just a little indication of when is this business model designed for? Is this designed for my launch? Is this the model or is this the model that's going to look like the model for 3 years from now, our aspirational goals of where we're trying to get to? Those models will change with time, as they should, because your business will be growing and changing and evolving throughout that time. So understanding when you're developing the business for is a critical aspect. So with that, it's the business model canvas. Hope this helps a little bit, and best of luck going to impact the world and using entrepreneurship to do so.